So welcome everyone, welcome to the course today. This is called Explaining a Crisis with Laura Foster from the Health and Science team. Laura, thank you ever so much for joining us today.
It's weird to be starting, so I'm in at my home today, and it's weird to be working from home in the spare room, but I've made it look like I'm in the office.
I'm so grateful for you doing this. I'm sure you've all seen Laura. Laura became almost the face of COVID for the BBC. During the last couple of years, doing what seemed like almost daily explainers. How many were you producing, Laura?
Oh gosh, it was at one point one a day. But I think it's really important to say that during the peak, I was not working by myself because they realized there was going to be serious burnout if you were going to be filming, editing, writing, resizing, publishing and promoting all in one day. So there was like a team, myself and another VJ, and some help from graphics, obviously, because it's very hard to do a video about something you cannot see without a little bit of graphic help.
Laura, first question for you is, what is an explainer? Why do they work?
So to me, video explainer, because obviously you can get text ones, but a video explainer is a short, punchy video that answers the key questions that people are asking of each other. That it really takes what is headline news or a very important story in the mainstream news and kind of puts it into context. I liken it to when you get a radio reporter coming on to the radio and the presenter will go, so what does this actually mean? Or what do we mean by this? It's about a really simple idea, breaking things down so that absolutely everyone can understand why a piece of news is significant and arm them with the information they need to go about their daily lives. So in the case of coronavirus, it's like, what do you need to know about this so you can protect yourself and your family and so on and so forth. And the reason why video explainers for the BBC, I think, are so important is because around the world, the BBC is just such a trusted news source. And what we found, what we find continuously, but what was really apparent during the pandemic was that people were turning to us a lot. Obviously, you want to be, if people are coming to you, you want to offer them the information they're after. And I think video explainers have been important for all sorts of topics, such as climate change. But when it came to this global health pandemic, they really stood up. And we saw that in the viewing figures and just how far these videos have traveled.
Okay, well, let's start right at the beginning then. Planning ahead. How does your team plan? Whenever I watched your video explainers, you always seem to know kind of what question I had in my head. It was extraordinary. How do you do that?
So first thing I say that planning ahead and news isn't one of those things that you assume goes hand in hand, because we can't plan the news. But actually, in some topic areas, you know what's coming up or what could come up, or there are topics which are going to come up again and again. So you can plan your coverage in terms of an explainer because you know something's going to come up again and again. So in the health and science teams, we actually have 2 diaries where we write down key things that are coming up. So we write down when climate change reports coming out. So for instance, like last week, we knew that climate change report was coming out for a while. We know there's a big climate summit happening in November. So a lot of our coverage at the moment is sort of planning for that. If we look at the health side of things and decisions within the UK, we know a decision is due soon about whether children 12 to 15 are likely to get the COVID vaccine. So when that decision comes out about whether they will or not, we'll have already had some ideas and some plans in motion as to what's the best way to cover it. So although it's about a lot of explainers can be about reacting to breaking news, it's also important to kind of keep one eye on what's coming up and think about what kind of questions are people going to be asking when that topic comes up again. It's almost like you've got to be the Googling the future trends, if that makes sense. And I think when it all pays off, it can be like, oh, how did you do that? How did you just know? How did you get a video together so quickly? Sometimes we do get a video together quickly, but a lot of the time it's about just having one eye on the future, because as we know, digital videos don't just happen in a couple of minutes. They take time and thought.
So here's a film that you've made. Tell us what this one is and how it came about and how you're prepared to do this.
Okay, so this video isn't about a crisis in any way, but it's about landings on Mars. So you may remember last summer, there seemed to be a lot of missions to Mars taking off at the same time. And actually there's a good reason for that. But when I was looking at how we were going to cover the Mars missions, there was both the takeoff and then there was the attempted landings. And it was like, well, how can we make a video which will work for both occasions, 6 months apart? And actually what are people going to be asking when they hear the news that there has been a launch or there has been a landing? And we came up with this idea, which I believe is why there's so many. I can't remember the title now. That's awful. I'll let you cue into it, Dan.
I don't remember what the title is either. Let's have a play, and I'm sure we'll be reminded by watching it. Here we go.
Landing on Mars is known as the 7 minutes of terror. A successful landing makes you want to celebrate.
Touchdown confirmed.
Touchdown, we have touchdown. Exozone.
But why exactly is getting to the Red Planet one of the toughest things in space travel? It's because the distance between Earth and Mars constantly changes, because each one orbits the Sun at different speeds and distances, from around 401 million kilometres to more like 56 million. About every 2 years, the two planets are in the perfect position for us to get to Mars with the least amount of rocket fuel.
3, 2, 0.
But this journey still takes about 7 months of cruising through space. If the launch goes well...
I'm just going to dip the sound here, Laura. Immediately, something that stood out when I watched this was that thing about Earth and Mars only being close to each other every so often. I did not know that at all. So it's really interesting, I thought, the way you found a different angle to cover this story.
Yeah. So Mars missions are like buses. They, you wait ages for one and then you get 3 all at once. And I remember thinking, well, why is that? Like, why don't we just fire things off all the time? And then we looked into it and we spoke to NASA a bit, and it's to do with the way the planets align. And I thought, well, that is actually really interesting. And that is something that I, as a science journalist, wasn't fully aware of. And I can always think, if you find yourself looking for ways to report a subject and you learn something about something that you probably should know more about than anyone else, then everyone else is probably going to find it new and interesting too. So this piece, I now remember the title of, was How Hard Is It to Get to Mars? Because that was a way to sort of tie it all up. How, whenever you hear any developments about a mission to Mars, it really kind of puts into context the achievement that this really is. And obviously, earlier this year, we know that NASA was successful in landing on Mars, so that was very exciting. But what I like about this video actually is it's a good use of graphics to demonstrate something. A lot of times in the pandemic, we just needed graphics because we had no pictures. And although it was beautiful and it was very popular on social media and very engaging, I feel like graphics really come into their own when you can physically demonstrate how things work. It's a bit science school textbook, but actually the reason why they are in textbooks and so on and so forth is to help people understand complicated issues.
And that one with Earth and Mars together really, really did that. So we're talking about planning. So you're looking ahead at events. Are you also are you thinking about when you can republish your previous films? I think this is something the BBC doesn't do enough. We don't kind of republish our explainers enough, but when you're looking ahead, are you thinking, oh, we could use that one again too?
Definitely. You want your video to be seen as much as possible. And I think I do it sometimes when I write a script, that you write it and then you realize, oh, actually, this can only really run until this date. And then people are going to watch it and think, oh, it's old. I'll click off of it. I'm not going to want to keep watching it. And the beauty of what we do, as opposed to television or radio, is that we are there on the internet forever. And obviously news pieces don't normally last forever or won't always be current, but there are things you can do to make sure that your piece will still be relevant. So we made this piece originally before the things even took off from Earth. And they were used throughout the 6-month period of the traveling to the Red Planet. They were used in the build up to the landing, but because there were 3 missions to Mars, it got used embedded in the text pieces for every single update on every single mission. And then it also worked on television and radio and other programs around the world. So in terms of reach, it was absolutely huge. And it's just really nice to know that your piece is still being watched, but more importantly, the same questions get asked again and again. So why not republish? Why not create something that is there for people to watch when they want to watch it? Because we're an on-demand world now, and the BBC really should be there giving people the information they need when they want it.
I guess as well, it helps you think about finding angles for your story that are a bit more interesting. If you're doing an explainer on this particular rocket launch to Mars, that's going to last for a few days. Whereas if you're finding an interesting angle as to, why does this only happen, every 4 or 5 years, then it's got a lot more longevity. It's something you can use again and again and again.
It also makes it stand out from all the other pieces. You'll notice like newspapers will be very quick to react to SEO trends and so on and so forth, and just go, what is Mars or what is NASA, and so on and so forth. And there is a time for video explainers which match SEO. But also I think in terms of, like you say, offering something different, capturing people's interest with an engaging title, or just unpicking things a little bit more for people who may know the basics, but they want an even bigger context, then definitely trying to find like a side angle to get into the story that people wouldn't have heard before definitely has its advantages, I'd say.
So planning ahead, really, really, really important. Just recap your tips here for us, Laura.
Yes, so wherever you are in the world, I don't know how it works in individual teams, but definitely have a diary, even if it's just in your own notebook of things that are coming up in what month. And then you can never write a date down too early, because you'll find that, when you're on the bus or whatever, you'll be thinking about how could we do this, and ideas will come to you. And it's really important that you don't forget about them, or that they factor into wider planning for the team. In terms of publishing your video, let's be honest, a lot of time it's out of our hands and it's down to website bosses and so on and so forth. But having your arguments ready about when would be the best time is really useful. If you've got a video that you think can work before an event, during an event, and after an event, then you should argue for it to go up before, gather that search traffic, gather that social interest, so that when the event happens and the searches rocket, oh, pardon the pun, then your video is there to capture that audience. And SEO is huge. I often sometimes just Google keywords I know that are coming up in climate change, or things like that, using services like Answer the Public and Google Trends, just to kind of get a feel for what people are talking about, but also looking at hashtags on places like Instagram, TikTok. What are people talking about? What are they thinking about? What will my friends be talking about when they hear like the story, like the IPCC reports? Looking at kind of occasions where that subject has come up before can really inform what you do next time that subject comes up.
Some really, really amazing tips. Can I just remind everyone, if you do have any questions for Laura, we absolutely are. We welcome them, and I will ask them at appropriate times. Please send them in. Thank you very much. Laura, brilliant tips there. We've already kind of touched upon this a tiny bit, but how do you find interesting angles? How do you know what people want to know? And also, I've added this in brackets, and what they don't know, they need to know.
So I think the first thing to remember is people never underestimate how basic an explainer you might need to do. For instance, one of the ones we did during the coronavirus explainer was, what does 1 meter look like? What does 2 meters look like? Which I thought, well, kind of people can kind of guess, can't they? Can't they? No. But actually, it was one of the most popular questions on Google. And I know I'm talking about Google a lot, but just kind of people want to know the key information. And it's really important that that key information is really loaded at the top end of your explainer and the added detail is towards the end. It's really important that when you title and explain a key question, that you actually answer that question, because otherwise it creates this kind of negative feedback whereby people watch a video, they realize that hasn't answered the question they wanted to, and they'll forever associate BBC Video with not answering the question, and we don't want that. So it's really important that you don't overreach with a question when you're choosing things. But it's about social listening, really. And I like to picture my friends. I like to picture I used to be a regional journalist up in the north, and I remember like the sorts of conversations I'd have with people down the pub there, as well as looking at the bigger Google trends and what's happening with that. But particularly when it comes to a crisis, I do think there is a time to maybe shy away from the SEO and try and do something different, because crises, pandemics, the world getting a lot hotter, global warming, it can all feel like a lot. And I do think there is a point where audiences just have had enough and they don't want to know anymore. So in those sorts of circumstances, it's about looking at the subject and go, well, how can I talk about the subject, but not actually make people realize that I'm talking about the subject and the key information again? And that's about trying to find different angles in.
I'm going to show for this film, this is about the symptoms of coronavirus. And obviously at the start of, if we go back to January, February, March last year, we were all incredibly worried. Every single kind of sniffle I got, I was absolutely convinced that I was going to have coronavirus or had it already. So this for me was really useful. I watched this a few times at the time, actually. Let's play a few seconds of it, and then we'll pick up with a couple of questions afterwards.
The two main symptoms of coronavirus to look out for are a continuous dry cough and/or a fever. Now, some people say they've lost their senses of smell and taste because of COVID-19, but the research on this is still at an early stage. Also, other viruses can make this happen too, like the common cold, so it doesn't necessarily mean you have this new coronavirus. So how high a fever is a coronavirus one? And what exactly is a continuous dry cough? Well, it's when you cough and there's no mucus or phlegm, basically no gooey substance in your tissue. And this means coughing a lot for more than an hour, or having 3 or more coughing episodes in a single day. This dry cough can also then lead to breathing problems. But how high a fever is a coronavirus fever?
I'm going to dip the sound here. I mean, that is a classic example, I think, Laura, of a video just giving the public, the information they need.
It was definitely one of those things where, what do we need to tell people urgently? And it was without a doubt whether you had coronavirus, what you knew. And people watching this might go, hang on, things have changed a bit since then. We updated this video at least 7 times because we felt that obviously the information was really important. So it was important to keep updating, but obviously that won't be the same for all explainers. It was a very quick turnaround. I think we did it in a couple of days, maybe a day. My memory of January, February, March 2020 is a little bit blurry from lack of sleep, and I apologize for that. But it was absolutely the key video to do at the time. And it was about reacting quickly. And this video traveled all around the world. This video was used by the health service here in the UK, the United Nations, the armed forces. And the reason why it was so popular was not just the topic, but because it was very simple. We didn't try to gimmick it in any way or try to create something jazzy or effects or anything, because it was a scary time. And it was all about how can we present this information in the most clear, easy to understand way.
But just to comment, this is literally just thinking about, okay, what are people searching at the moment? And that was probably the most common question, and making sure that you get something that hits that question, I guess.
Absolutely. It wasn't actually the first video we made about coronavirus. I think a lot of people think it was the first one. The original one was, what is coronavirus, which is what people were asking first. And then once they heard that it was a thing, they wanted to know more about the symptoms.
Mm-hmm.
And once we did this symptom video, we looked at it and we realized, well, hang on, we explained what a continuous dry cough is and a fever, but then we realized, well, hang on, these are symptoms which come up with a lot of illnesses. Hay fever season was right around the corner in the UK, and we knew that flu season was coming up. And so we took what we did in a previous video and we looked at the comments and of what people were saying, and that informed our decisions about videos coming up. One thing I did learn was the very, very first video we did was, what is coronavirus and how do I protect myself? And the request from the bosses was to have one video with all the information in. And it did very, very well at the time. But obviously it quickly dated and it was very long. So my experience is that people will watch for longer if the videos are more bite-sized. So this is 1:38, so 90 seconds. And that kind of is the kind of golden period, golden duration for an explainer, I feel. But if it's a subject which has a lot of detail in, and that detail is really important, then you shouldn't omit it. Explainers is all about fine balance between giving people all the information they need to know without overloading them on the subject.
The next video we're going to show is something that when we were chatting about this session, you said something really interesting, which is it's really good to look for the questions that people are asking on Google and answering those. But also you said, looking at the questions that people haven't asked yet. And this next video I'm going to show, this one, I think is a great example of that. So quickly tell us about this video.
So this video is about the plastic pollution and the plastic bag. And there's a lot of chatter of plastic pollution has really become a big deal to a lot of people in recent years. We've seen a lot of the devastation that it's caused and is causing still. And as an environment team, we've done a lot of this is the problem, this is the problem, this is the problem, what's the solution? And I think what a lot of people didn't realize that just ditching a plastic bag and grabbing a paper bag wasn't the answer. It is the answer in some respects, but it doesn't tell the full story. And I just sat there thinking about this poor guy who must have invented the plastic bag. I wonder what he thinks of it now. And actually, I tracked down the family of the man who invented the plastic bag. And we had a little conversation over the phone, and they told me something very interesting about it. And I thought, oh, hang on, this is another way into the plastic pollution story. This is getting people to think about it in a different, interesting way with a personal tale at the heart of it.
Plastic bags seem to be one of the most hated things on the planet. But did you know that when it comes to things like climate change, paper and cotton bags are actually much worse for the planet than plastic?
When people look at environmental impacts, they tend to focus right at the end of the life cycle analysis. They see the plastic pollution, that's a massive problem. But what far fewer people see is right at the beginning of the production side.
In fact, the plastic bag was originally invented to help save the planet.
To my dad, the idea that people would simply throw these away would be bizarre.
That's Raoul Tulin. His father, Sten Gustaf Tulin, is credited with inventing the plastic bag we know today, back in Sweden in 1959. Back then, people used paper bags a lot, and for those they needed to cut down a lot of trees, which wasn't exactly great for the planet. Sten had an idea. He worked out that if he could create a strong bag that was light and would last for ages, then people could use it over and over again. And that would mean fewer trees being chopped down, which would be better for the environment.
It was very much an improvement on what there was before. He always carried one in his pocket folded up. You know, what we're all being encouraged to do today, which is to take your own bags to the shop. He was doing back in the 70s and 80s, just naturally, because, well, why wouldn't you?
Problem.
That's such an interesting angle, Laura. One I just hadn't thought of at all.
Well, I hadn't thought of it really. I I'd phoned the son, I'd traced the family tree and got in contact with the son just to find out, expecting a story of, oh, it's awful what we've become, we feel really bad. And then actually it shows, well, as soon as they mentioned it on the phone, that, you know, the whole point was to avoid situations like this and to save the planet. And that actually got me emotionally. And again, if it gets you as a journalist emotionally, it's going to have an impact with our audiences as well, I believe. I just knew I had to do something on it. And it was a story that resonated, and it did travel across lots of platforms and was picked up by other media outlets. And the video goes on to explain why the plastic bag isn't the root of all evil. It has its problems, let's be honest, but actually plastic's not the problem. It's humans that are the problem. And just getting people to think about that in a different way, rather than just, here's a load of plastic, what are you doing? Just picking up on that idea of plastic pollution, but reframing the way you're looking at the topic.
A couple of really, really good examples there. What other tips do you have for finding angles for stories?
The
other thing I really, really like about your explainers, I'm not a scientific or health person at all, but I understand your explainers. So tell us what the trick is for that.
Oh gosh. I think science is one of those topics that I think people obviously first come across in school. And if you had a good science teacher at school, then you might like science. But I think there are a lot of people who write science off as too complicated or too boring, or just not for them. It's not for them. But actually, when you think about science as literally just explaining the world around us, how can you engage people with everything they see? It's actually quite easy. The key thing is to ditch all the scientific terms wherever possible, and just think about, how would I explain this to someone who is my friend? How would I explain to someone at the dinner table what I've been doing today? And as soon as you picture your audience when you're scripting, that kind of removes you from that science chat that you may have had with the people you're interviewing, and connects you much more with the audience who are going to be listening. And I think it's really important that we speak to audiences like we're one of them, and not try to sound clever or intelligent. And I think that's at the heart of a lot of digital pieces.
I've put your tips up on the screen there. Just talk us through those really quickly. Your 5 takeaways from this bit.
Yes, so the risk of overselling Google, it is invaluable. And you can tailor it obviously to your country, but I like to look at worldwide trends, because that will increase the reach of videos. And actually it's better for the BBC to have videos that everyone will find interesting. This can work in reverse too. So for instance, we did an explainer called "What happens if I don't get the vaccine?" Just another way of taking all the questions that are being asked about vaccines, but going, well, hang on, what's a different way in? What happens if you don't get the COVID vaccine? KISS, keep it simple, stupid. Don't overcomplicate things. If you're finding that it's a mouthful to say, it's probably a mouthful to hear. Just keep focusing on what is the key bit of information you want your audiences to come away with. Try and put that high in the video, and the people who get it and the people who want to learn more will keep with you as long as you keep engaging them throughout the rest of the video. And solutions are always great to end with, particularly if you're covering a crisis. You don't want to leave people feeling desperate and not knowing what to do or how to act. So if you can put in the advice of what they should do next, or what is recommended they do next, it's always important that you attribute what is recommended to an organization, a reputable organization. As journalists, we shouldn't tell people what to do. We should report the facts and what is being recommended by various bodies to do. Some
really, really useful tips there. We've got our first question. Hooray! Thank you very much, Jessica Cruz. This is quite a difficult question for you to answer. We'll try and do it. We'll try and get this answer out the best we can. How can video explainers help with fake news? Do you keep your eyes on that as well to get ideas for videos?
I do. And also just because I see fake videos on the internet, the deliberately try not to curtail my social bubble, so that, because I don't want to be caught down a rabbit hole. So I think we have a BBC department which is separate to mine, and their job is to combat fake news. So I don't deliberately take a piece of fake news and try and do a video explainer to kind of counteract it. But if you look at what's being said in these videos, which are largely videos being shared via WhatsApp and Facebook, it can inform things which you do decide to do. For instance, there's a lot of fake news about how the vaccine, which says incorrectly that the vaccine affects fertility and pregnant women. And we knew that we needed to do something on that, but not to combat the fake news, but to put the correct information out there. So rather than doing it as a response, because that almost gives this fake news more of a precedent, just to set the information out there to make it clear why decisions were being made, why they were being made later in the UK with regards to pregnant women being offered the vaccine. So I think it's important to use it as a reference point in terms of guiding what you could be doing, but we shouldn't spend our whole time just trying to combat fake news. We do the news, we don't post responses to incorrect theories on the internet. We're very much rooted in fact, and we shouldn't just be trying to sort things out.
Laura, tips on scripting.
So scripting for digital and television, as I'm sure you guys know, it is different. Television traditionally has been more formal, more gravitas, whereas I feel that with digital, you don't really have time to paint a picture or set a scene or get like that. You kind of want to talk to your audience, and audiences are generally younger. They're people like yourself. And I find whenever I'm writing a script, I like to picture the people I know. And when you've got that audience in your mind, you'll find that the words come more easily. Shorter sentences are helpful. I ditch adjectives, you don't need them. What can you do to be as clear as possible and get as much information in as possible?
Anyone who's done any course with me knows I talk a lot about the kind of the tone of digital video, how it needs to be really informal, chatty, all of those things. Can you script that, Laura?
I think you can. You can definitely script it, but one thing to say when it actually comes to recording the script is that I do ad lib. I kind of picture myself somewhere else other than the video booth or in front of the camera in the green screen room. I don't read from the script, because if you read from the script, you automatically sound more formal than if you just are sat here chatting. But if you've spent time over the script, you know what you're going to say. And unless it's sort of a legal issue, in which case you should read verbatim, then I do think you should feel free to ad lib.
Should we have a look? We've chosen a couple of clips here. One's a TV package and one's a digital piece on the same subject. So this is the TV piece.
These are steps towards a new era of spaceflight. NASA's Doug Hurley and Bob Behnken, the first astronauts to launch from American soil in almost a decade. And this is the rocket, built by SpaceX, a company about to make history by carrying people into space.
Bob, Doug, have an amazing flight and enjoy those views of our beautiful planet.
3, 2, 1, 0. Ignition. Liftoff of the Falcon 9 and Crew Dragon. Go NASA, go SpaceX.
So quite a kind of classical TV piece there.
Yes, very much it's a beautifully told piece by my colleague Rebecca Morrell, and it tells the story of what happened that day. That's what a news report for television does. You know, the astronauts came out with their really cool looking spacesuits, and then they got in the thing, and then they went up, and lovely up sounds and beautiful detail, all in chronological order. But in terms of an explainer to go with it, we knew we wanted something that could run before launch. We wanted something that could go during the launch, post-launch, and be used in future SpaceX NASA stories. So immediately you had to think about the language, but also not use things like, you know, today the word today immediately dates your pieces. And there are lots of examples of those kind of words that you just need to get out of your explainer if you want it to have like longevity. We'll play the digital piece now, which sets out things in a very different way. And I hope you like it.
SpaceX has created reusable rocket launch systems, sent a car into space, launched satellites into orbit, and now a partnership with NASA means it's the first private company to take humans into orbit and to the International Space Station. It's achieved a lot since it began in 2002, but its ultimate goal is to get humans living on other planets. SpaceX is the brainchild of this guy, Elon Musk.
It's important that we become a spacefaring civilization and ought to be out there among the stars. And we want the things that are in science fiction novels and movies not to be science fiction forever. We want them to be real one day.
He helped found the company that became PayPal. He then founded Tesla and is supposedly the inspiration for Robert Downey Jr.'s version of Tony Stark, aka Iron Man in the Marvel films.
This is mad.
He's known for speaking his mind, and more recently for giving
Well,
his
tell us
child
the
a rather
differences then.
I hope mine's on a bit of a delay, so I hope everyone else can watch that in real time. So apologies if not. But it's shorter. The sentences are shorter. It's punchier. There are obviously a lot more shots at the beginning, trying to get straight into the action. But the idea is, and I know you've referenced this in your sessions before, Dan, just to give them enough information that first 15 seconds that makes them go, whoa, cool. What else? What am I gonna, and it sets the precedent of what you're gonna learn for the rest of the time period. It's not about they're going up today, this is going to happen, they'll arrive at this time. It's about avoiding all those kind of phrases and thinking, this is why they're going, this, and answering the key questions that people had about SpaceX at that time. And these are still the key questions people have about SpaceX. Elon Musk is one of those people that a lot of people know who he is, but they don't know why they know who he is. So putting them high up is also really useful because it kind of keeps people interested. But for this piece, I literally Googled the most asked questions about SpaceX and made sure I answered every single one within 2 minutes 15, apparently. And this complemented the TV offering so much that it was used as well as the TV offering because it just tackled different things. And it was embedded in the text pieces that went on afterwards.
It's really interesting you're talking there about kind of creating these kinds of more timeless pieces. We've got a couple of examples of a script here. So this is, I think, is a really good demonstration of the kind of things you should be looking out for. So tell us about this script, first of all. What are the problems with this script?
So doing a piece about wildfires is obviously very topical right now. But it's when something is topical right now, it's very easy to slip into, I find it's very easy to slip into language which is about the here and now. And actually, if you're going to all this effort to make a video, it'd be really good if it could still apply in a few months' time. It might not always be the case, but it would be really good if it still could. So the things you see underlined, like images like this are dominating our TV screens. That has been true for like the last few weeks, particularly in the UK, but I know it does feel overwhelming. There are so many places that are experiencing wildfires right now around the world. But right now we're in the middle of wildfire season in a lot of those countries. And in a few months' time, you won't be seeing these things on the news. So that automatically will date as soon as wildfire season is over in the northern parts of the northern hemisphere in a couple of months' time. Last year, bushfires in Australia were so bad. So they were awful in Australia in the 2020 season. They were devastating. And although that's a wonderful fact, is a really poetic fact, as soon as January the 1st comes along 2022, it's going to be inaccurate. And it's really important that we maintain accuracy. This month, so the climate change literally a week ago, released this huge report about the state of the planet, awful report, and how we really need to do things ASAP. But that will date as soon as September comes along. So it's about looking for those key words that you find always sneak into scripts.
So here's a slightly tweaked version of that script to create a bit more of a timeless script.
Yeah. So you're not saying that fires are on the television, but you are saying that there are fires still happening around the world. You put the exact year for the bushfires. Obviously, as soon as you put years in, it means that people might go, oh, hang on, why are you giving me 2020 when it's 2022? But if it's a particular event that's worth remembering, then I think a date can work really well. If you start to say figures from 2019, that's the sort of thing that can date really quickly as well. So try to avoid that, but sometimes figures are really useful to help you make your point.
It's really interesting just how taking out a few words can massively kind of increase the longevity of a video and increase its reusability and its republishability.
Yeah, it's such a simple thing, but you will notice your piece travel further. And as journalists, we just want our stories to be heard far and wide, don't we? Particularly when they're about important topics. And it will save you time in the long run because you won't be updating an explainer. So that's good for your workload. But also it's important to realize that there may be occasions where you can't do that. It has to be a reaction to the here and now, and that's okay too. But sometimes I find when that is the case, we think about, well, if this is something that's going to change rapidly a lot in the next couple of weeks, should we be doing a video on it? Or should we just leave it to the text team to do a text piece on this issue, because they can literally change things in a few seconds. Because you don't want to put all your eggs in one basket if you know it's going to date the next day. It's just not a good use of your time.
Your tips again for scripting, these are your 5 takeaways.
Yes. Oh, I forgot to say that point, so we better talk about it now. When you're explaining things, I think it's really important to say this isn't just what the BBC thinks. As journalists, we always want to attribute the facts to where we got them from. So I use a lot that credit toolkit thing in the top right. So when you're saying the vaccine has been found to be safe and effective, you can look in the top right and it will say the sources, NHS, the MHRA, which is the medicines regulator here in the UK. Always important to attribute your sources. This isn't something the BBC's made up. This is where the information comes from. It just really reinforces that idea of trust and transparency. Make sure we go out of date quickly. So avoid words like last week. We've talked about keeping it chatty. I know when I do radio scripts and television scripts, I read them as if I'm doing the television news and I will sound more serious. So you should do the same with a digital script. Read it aloud. If you've got someone opposite you, your colleague, read it to them. If not, picture someone who you are chatty with and pretend you're talking to them about it. That will really help get the vibe right. Allow room for ad-libbing, but obviously make sure you don't go off topic or say something that's incorrect. It's nice to have that kind of animation, but don't jeopardize the accuracy of what you're doing. And write a script with your visuals in mind. Yeah, so if when you think about a digital piece, you want your best shots at the top and you want your best audio at the top. So how can you match? Although I tend to write script first and then pictures, I always have an idea in my mind of what pictures I have at my disposal or what pictures I'm going to need at my disposal.
That kind of leads us really nicely into this next bit. I do apologize. My internet's going incredibly unstable today. This is because I've got 2 kids at home playing Fortnite at the moment. And so working with visuals, what's your tips for this?
There are a lot of topics, particularly in health, which aren't very interesting visually as, say, they are for science and the environment. And in that case is maybe thinking about different ways you could film or illustrate, whether that's through graphics or whether that's through filming something else, some sort of imagery that kind of links up with the topic you're talking about. But as I've said, we are digital video, and leading with strong images is what's really going to keep our audience there.
Let's have a look at one of your films.
Choose your character.
If the COVID vaccines were video game characters, what would their stats be? Let's take a look. Effectiveness.
A lot of figures have been bandied about, but all of them have been based on trial data, and it's really hard to compare like for like.
Pfizer-BioNTech says its vaccine is up to 95% effective after 2 doses. The Moderna vaccine is said to be nearly 95% effective, while the Oxford-AstraZeneca one is between 62 and 90% effective. This 62% figure may sound lower, but no one who received the Oxford vaccine during trials was hospitalised or became...
So this was a trend on TikTok
Basically, they all work, otherwise they wouldn't
towards the end of last year.
price.
And it was very much about pretending you were a video game character, and anyone who's sort of 30 or above or 25 or above will remember old school video games where the characters appear and then they're just sort of bopping like this. And I just thought, well, everyone's talking about the vaccines and whether they're any good and which one's best, and it just kind of seemed like an automatic it was a wacky idea that came to our minds, and we thought, what if we try and parody TikTok at the start of this video? And we decided to dress up. I dressed up as the vaccines and had a little hat for Oxford and a little chimp because it's based on a chimp virus, and then quickly ran out of ideas on how to dress up as Pfizer and Moderna, so just had like lab coats. But that sound is really it's something that a lot of people who've ever come across those old school video games will remember, so it's really engaging, but also younger audiences who are only on TikTok will recognize as well. And this video was really popular not just because of the start or the content, but just the whole theme the whole way through. And with a lot of the best explainers happen when you have if you are having graphics, if you've got that resource, when you get them involved from the very beginning. So I might write a script, but then we immediately all jump on a Zoom and think, well, how can we make this into a visual thing? What elements can we do? And we talked about the TikTok idea, and the graphics person said, well, if you want to continue the gaming idea, then why not this kind of top trumps card if you want to continue the idea of vaccines competing? Even though the end conclusion is they're not competing, they all work and they're all great. So having that kind of collaboration does lead to a more creative process. But I'm not going to lie, that start was something that we had to persuade our bosses about to take a chance on. On the other hand, I've never seen such reaction from places like BBC Japan for a video, because it just really tapped into the zeitgeist, I think.
So this comes back to that point we made just before about really thinking about how you can get your script to work with different pictures. This is all joined up thinking. Yeah. I know as a video journalist, a lot of the time I work by myself, and I don't think that leads to always to the most creative videos, because bouncing ideas off of other people is just invaluable, I think. But also it kind of proves that even that video that was made in the height of the UK lockdown, where we couldn't go anywhere or film anything, there are still kind of creative treatments you can film yourself or you can do to just breathe life into something which is, I think most people would have ruled out as a complete text piece on the vaccines. Whereas I think we all know that there is room for both text explainers and video explainers, because people like to consume information differently. And it just takes a little bit of headspace, a little bit of thought. I know not everyone might have access to graphics, and what we've been very keen to do the whole way through is make the graphics we have made in the UK available to all video journalists around the BBC world, to help them tell their stories, because we've made them most of the time without any kind of language on, so that they can be easily used again and again. I know the digital development team are doing a lot of work at the moment on explainers. If you do want any help at all, please contact me or Elise Wicker or Board from the digital development team. I'll be really, really, really happy to help you kind of scripting to visuals and thinking about different kind of visual treatments for your explainers. We'd be really, really happy to help. Laura, your tips were these?
Yeah, so when you write your scripts, just think about the pictures, just in the way that people would with a television package. It's really important that you remember we are a visual medium first, and it's really important to keep people engaged and match your scripts, and just think about, well, this is a really important point and it needs to go high. What artistic way could we demonstrate this that will still keep people captivated? Scripting for graphics is important. The best graphics are when you demonstrate something. So a bit like that Mars explainer about the planets aligning. And we've done things about how social distancing works. And when you're showing people something, that's when a video explainer really comes into its own rather than a text piece. The designers I've worked with, and I make it sound like it's loads, it's usually just one person at a time, but they know what looks good far better than you do, and they know what they're capable of. So let them lead you in with the options. Sometimes I say, we're going to be doing something about this coming up. I want you to play around. I want you to take time to think about imagery. I want you to take time to think about how it could look. Because the longer they have to come up with a graphic, the better it will be and the less stress there'll be. So that's good for everyone. And just so we've seen so far in a variety of videos, bits of archive. There's so much in the BBC resources, particularly now not the whole world isn't in lockdown anymore. Use it, it's really good. And it's ours. Getty is great, but I think you can really tell when Getty has been used. And I think the audience can tell as well. So if you can use a BBC shot, use that over a Getty. And just never stop thinking creatively. They'll try something. There have been things we've tried for video explainers where the boss has gone, actually, I'm not sure that works. Or we've tried stuff and they've gone, oh, wow, I didn't think that would work, but it does. Don't be afraid to be experimental. The digital platform is one that I think allows them maybe a little bit more creativity. Embrace that.
Your final thoughts are with these?
Final thoughts. So I don't pretend to be an expert in explainers. I do think I've learned a lot about them in the last 18 months. And what has caught me is how much the audience seem to really like them. Not just in a kind of social views, but just the feedback we get that the BBC should be doing more of these things. What I have been surprised by is the demand. People want to read about detail, but they also want to just look at it and they want to engage with it and they want to take that video and share it on WhatsApp to their friends. As I've said earlier, they've been used by health services and UN. They've been sent out by GPs to their patients. And so a good explainer with the right production levels can really travel, and they've been used on the radio and television as well. So you really feel like a multi-platform journalist. People, particularly in crises and difficult times, they turn to organizations like the BBC for the information they need to know to get them through difficult times and arm them with the information they need to protect themselves and their families. But not everyone likes to read. Not everyone wants to look at a big long text piece or wants to look at a picture with stills. They just want to Google something on YouTube. With a good angle, anything can be interesting. I do think that's true. It might be that it's not necessarily a video piece, and that's okay. If you don't have the pictures to do a video piece and you're really scrambling, then don't stress about it. It's definitely something to talk about when you're planning a video with your line manager or whomever. But if you're given the time to work on it and to think creatively about ways to tackle it, and if we can make a virus that you can't see, a visual thing, there's definitely an argument that you can do it with other stories as well. And also the bulk of all the work, pretty much every single piece you saw there was created during a lockdown or strict restrictions. So working remotely is challenging and it's frustrating, but technology is great these days, and you can do Zoom interviews and you can do Zoom pieces to camera, and you can explore the archive, and you can film things just like on the floor in your bedroom or something like that, just to help illustrate a point. So please don't let the any restrictions put you off or dissuade you from the fact that you might not be able to make as good a video as you would be able to if you were allowed outside. You back, Dan?
Well, hello there, welcome back, Dan. Thank you so much for carrying on whilst my internet entirely shut down. That just proves what a model professional you are. Thank you very, very much for doing that, and well done. Kamal's question, I think, kind of follows quite nicely from this, is, what is the ideal length for an explainer? And it's a really tough thing to answer. I'll let you have a go first, and then I'll drop my thoughts in as well.
Oh, thanks for letting me go first.
Or do you want me to go first on that?
I'll give it a go. The ideal length for an explainer is enough time to give people the information they need. If you have things that you think they want to know and you don't think it takes too long, then throw them in. But it needs to be the information they need to understand a topic. The kind of rule that's suggested by the data is 90 seconds. We went through a phase where we tried to make videos under a minute. Sort of, I think the symptoms one's 1:15. And that was to do with kind of Instagram stuff. But the key thing, like with other digital videos, is that first 15 seconds is crucial. And the shorter you can make it while covering the bases, the better. But there are some topics which needed longer. So that vaccine effectiveness one was longer than is recommended, but it was really important to hit all those points. We did a piece about how is the vaccine made safe? And you wouldn't want to scrimp on any of that important information, because you want to demonstrate exactly how they check a vaccine is safe. So it's a weighing up of what information is needed and what information is surplus, which obviously isn't a definitive amount, and that probably doesn't help you in any way. Equally, if you haven't got loads of pictures, then definitely err on the side of shorter, because you don't want to stretch it out with boring pictures, if that makes sense. Dan, what do you think?
My answer to that question is equally vague. Sorry, that sounded really rude. My answer to that question is always the same. It is basically not a second too long, not a second too short. You can frustrate a viewer by not giving them enough information, and you can bore them by giving them, way too much. So just really kind of using your journalistic skill to kind of get it down to, the right length. Obviously, what platform you're on will have a slight impact as well.
Definitely.
But yeah, not a second. Yeah, if you'll play it to someone, if they look bored, then that's a good guide that it's too long, right? Or if you play it and they say, oh, but there's more that I need to know, then maybe that finding or thinking about what questions you haven't answered or what else you could use to kind of give a bit more kind of oomph to it is also worth thinking about. It's a really, really tough. It's the question I get asked all the time in every course I ever do. What's the right length for a digital video? Not a second too long, not a second too short.
Absolutely. I'd recommend that you WhatsApping your video, like your work in progress, to other members of digital video teams and just say, this is my video. At what point did I lose you? And if they're good friends, they'll be honest and say, well, I kind of started looking at my phone at this section. And then automatically that maybe that's a section you can condense it down a bit. It's one of those situations where don't be afraid to ask for a second set, because particularly when you're working by yourself, you can be doing so much with the subject that you might not be able to see the forest through the trees. So, which is where people who are coming blind to it, like an audience would be, can help.
I had a colleague whose opinion I trusted massively, and I would always ask her to watch my videos because she was quite blunt. Sometimes she would say, that bit is boring as hell. She'd never say, oh, it's too long, but she would be really quite specific with the bits and say, that bit lost me, or that bit got me really bored. And she would tell me, and I would always take those bits out. So having somebody who can be totally honest with you, who can watch it kind of impartially, and who isn't going to give you a vague answer like, oh yeah, it feels a bit long. Having someone who can watch it and be really specific, I think is really useful.
And the reverse, they might watch it and go, oh, tell me more about that.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Unpack that a bit more.
Are there any more questions, anyone?
Oh, there we go. I hope that's because I've answered a lot rather than
it's been a really, really useful session, I think, Laura. I mean, your work throughout the pandemic, you know, you were kind of omnipresent on my digital devices, because I thought you answered, you know, the questions that I had. You gave me the answers to all the questions that I had in my head, seemingly all the time, and I think that is what a good explainer is. You're thinking about what the audience wants to know the answers to, and providing them with that information in a way that is simple and understandable for simple people like me.
Don't describe yourself as simple, because I think people just want clear information. I think particularly in the UK and other countries, there's a lot of mixed messages from different people, and people just want to know the facts. They just want to be told simply what's going on so they can get on with their lives.